I'm seeing white culture and I'm seeing black culture. And I'm trying to find my place in there because I'm a little bit of both, but I didn't really identify with the stereotype of both, obviously, because I'm black. So if I walk into a white event, I felt like people kind of looked at me like, they judged me like, okay, what is he gonna do? If you mean me being black, walk into a black event with my perspective, people kind of judge me. So it's just like, what am I supposed to be here? Being the token, being the only black kid, that stuff that plays a mental part on you because you feel like the social pressures make you feel like you need to overcompensate and really be, black. But then at the same time, there's other parts where it makes you feel like you need to fall back and not be black, not be who you are. It's weird. It's hard to explain. But I will say for anybody who is going through it, I totally sympathize with you because it's a weird to navigate. And my parents didn't grow up. Me and my parents shared different experiences growing up. My dad, he grew up in an all-black school, all-black everything. He didn't really have to, desegregate until he got into his workplace. My mom, she was one of the first ones that got put into the desegregation change with the school system. So she was pulled out of her black-only high school and put into a white high school and had to mix and had to deal with all that stuff. Plus, my mom grew up in a poverty situation. My dad did not as much. But that's not the point of this. The point of it is just to say that there's a mental thing it does to black people, and trying to navigate in America who you are and what you want to be is not easy. And especially you don't at that point in time there was no internet, so it wasn't like I can just go and look at somebody and be like, yeah, that's who I should be. So there was a lot of stuff I had to navigate as a child. But let's fast forward a little bit, right? So I got my guitar. Okay, I'm playing, everything's good, and I go to college. And up until college, I never really took playing guitar seriously, so I never really got good at playing guitar in the first place. So it was just the thing I had. I really wanted the drums. I got the drums, loved the drums, killed the drums, and really had a great time on the drums. But in college, you have a lot of time to do things, and that's where I learned how to play guitar. I had a friend of mine who was actually black and Asian who, introduced me to people like Jimi Hendrix, introduced me to people like Stevie Ray Vaughan, people who I had never heard anybody talk about to me. And that changed my perspective of what, where I fit as a black person in the scope of rock music, because it wasn't something that was apparently foreign to us as black people. I got more educated, learned about Prince. I knew about Prince, but I didn't really see Prince. I didn't know Prince as the guitar player. It was more so Prince I grew up with Prince the shock and awe because of the culture that I was around. They were more concerned about Prince being the shock and awe than Prince being the actual artist. So having friends that love music, that introduced me to different types of music and pointed me to, Prince was a bad boy on the guitar, bad boy on the bass, things like that. Like that changed my perspective of who I could be in music. So let's talk about the impact that it had on me in rap music. With rap music, I was literally in a situation where I had to figure out who was I gonna be, because I was in a group with somebody who definitely knew they were way more like hood than me, another person that was way more hood than me, and we had another person that was the pretty boy. So who was I gonna play? Who was I gonna be? I thought maybe I could be like the Dr. Dre of the group, like the mad scientist guy that's just making the beats. But I remember I had a friend of mine who was a very smart, very intuitive person. And she told me, because I needed her advice and I trusted her. She said, look, you guys are great, but P, you are doing too much thinking. And that's because I was trying to put on an image of what I thought I should be and not being who I should be, who I am. that hit hard that day. Because I was still trying to figure it out. I was still trying to figure out who I was. So the last story I told you, that group broke up. And I'm making my solo album. And one of the songs I made on my solo album, I decided to make a rock song because, that's what people do when they have many different types of musical experiences. So I make the rock song and I get the idea to go ahead and start a band. So I'm on this journey of being in a band. Okay? And I'm the face, I'm the front man. So now I have to deal with all of the clout or issues of getting the gigs and having people really allow us into the door to do our thing as a hip hop group. And I was trying to explain what it was that we did, but man, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's not easy at all to explain what you do as an artist in rock music. You feel like you want people to understand, but who are you trying to connect to? Who was my audience? Was it people who look like me who had similar backgrounds? Or was it something different? Was it for everybody? Trying to find your target market is one of the biggest things to do in music, period. You try to say, okay, this is who I'm aiming for. This is who I'm going to go after. Guys, trying to market my face on my band, it really was like a pickle, because there wasn't really anybody to really point to and say, this is how you do it, and this is really what's popping off. The closest thing we got to was Black Eyed Peas, and that obviously that's not a rock band. But let me tell you my euphoria moment is when I was getting rejected in the beginning of the band, where people were saying hey, look, we don't want hip hop here. If I were showing up to a place to try to book a gig, they would basically be like, look, you can play here as long as you don't play rap music, as long as you don't rap. So, and my band was made off of my solo album. It's a rap album that had a live backing, right? So I was confused. The crazy thing was when I played, I was actually able to win over the owner, because I won over the patrons. Everybody in the place that heard it liked the sound. They loved the sound. So I started digging and just kind of keeping my eyes open, and I'm finding out groups like NERD, checking them out, seeing how they're doing and everything like that. And I felt like maybe there is a space for us, a space for me as a rock artist. It was hard when you've got a lot of self-doubt and you're confused about who you are. Really, nobody can point you out and say, well, at least to me, I didn't feel like anybody could point me to the place where I needed to be. I just had to figure out how to get there, how to get to that point. And from being not black enough to be black amongst my peers, my black peers, and to feeling like being who I wasn't being accepted from some of my white peers. At least some of them that had the ability to control whether or not I could perform at their venues or stuff like that. Now that's not everybody, but definitely here in the South where I'm from, I felt that. I felt like if I had grown up in a different place, like maybe if I had grown up in California, I wouldn't have had the issues, because I feel like California is a lot more open-minded. And I always felt like even when I go to Cali, like it feels like a place that I should have just moved to and been at. But you can't run away from your problems. You kind of have to address it. But anybody who's struggling, trying to figure out what lane do they fit in as a black young person, or just a black person in general, in this weird world where, you don't necessarily have the same struggles as like an NWA, or the same struggles as like a lot of rappers who grow up rapping about things that you're like, well, I don't really relate to that, right? I thought Kanye was. It's probably one reason why I loved Kanye at the beginning. Is like Kanye spoke to a part of me that was really identifiable. He wasn't talking about selling drugs. He was just talking about being himself in the beginning, early Kanye. And that was awesome. But then he went crazy. You know, he got lost in the sauce, and now he's on a different planet right now. So you can't really put your faith in other people, but you have to have that strength in who you are as a person. I will tell you that, you know that Dave Chappelle skit where he's got John Mayer and they're going different places, and he's like, white people dance to the guitar, black people dance to drums and stuff like that. That is true. It's funny, but it's true. I recall I had a show at a black fashion event, and the beginning of the show started us out like it's beatboxing, right? And I'm coming out rapping, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm rapping on top of a beatbox. And I got the crowd's like this. Okay, I see you, young man, you know, predominantly black crowd. And then the beat drops, and the beat drops with my power chord. It's a guitar-driven song. It's called I Go, We Go. It's a Prodigy GT song. And as soon as I pulled that guitar out and I hit that chord, I'll never forget the people's faces. They were just like, the hell? It was like that the rest of the show. It was like that the rest of the show. It wasn't always like that with black crowds, but it was definitely like that day. And I definitely had other experiences that weren't too far from that with the black crowd. I've never had that experience with the white crowd when I pull out a guitar, you know? And that's the struggle. It's like I want to be somebody that people who look like me can look up to. I want to be an example. But I need my people to love me. That's how I felt. I felt like I needed my people to love me. And then I just got to a point where I just stopped caring. I just started doing what I do. And ironically, that was when I started getting the most love. And I started getting love from like young kids. But I noticed something too. From the progression, from the beginning of my career, the culture had progressed. And I'm so thankful of somebody like Lil Wayne. And that Lil Wayne made doing what you want to do cool. He made skateboarding cool. Now you see black kids skateboarding. It's not an only white thing. You see black kids skateboarding. He made playing the guitar cool. Now you see black kids playing the guitar, starting rock bands. He made that cool because he was the #1 rapper and he was doing all of that, right? And then him and Drake made singing cool. So that changed a lot when rappers were able to sing because, you know, 50 Cent made that not cool. So now singing's cool, playing guitar is cool, rapping's cool, skateboarding's cool. All the things that I could quickly say this may be like a blocker to me were no longer a blocker to me. So I no longer had an excuse. No longer had an excuse. And I no longer was holding back. Some of my best friends that I made in music were people who I did not expect to give me a shot. And they gave me a shot because they realized something about what I was doing. They could relate to me. I had a friend named Sonny Ledford. And he saw me perform at this event in Charlotte. It was some magazine event that we were performing at because we were picked to be on it. And the editor-in-chief pulls me to the side. He goes, hey man, Sonny Ledford wants to talk to you. Now, I don't know who Sonny Ledford is at this point in time, but my guitar player, he knew who he was. And he was like, oh man, Sonny Ledford, that's awesome. And you know, back then, Sonny was signed to a record label. So in Charlotte, it wasn't many people signed to a record label back then. So him being signed to a record label was like a big deal. So I go and I meet him and we're talking. And he's like, yo man, I used to do the same thing. I used to do the same thing that you did. You know, I was like, in a rap rock band back in, you know, the early 2000s or whatever. And, you know, now I'm doing what I want to do. I want to make country rap music, which I didn't know existed. No clue. Man, when I first saw country rap, oh my gosh. He put me on a show with him in like Salisbury or someplace. I don't know where it was. It was someplace. We pull up to the show and it's like a gas station, cornfield like this, and that's it. All you could see was the cornfield and it was flat. So we pull up, we're like, well, yo, this is weird. The seats were like bales of hay, and that's what the seats were. So it was like, okay, so we're gonna perform outside on this patio at this gas station, and what? Man, that place got so packed, and that crowd loved my music so much. I was just blown away. Every show I did with him, I was exposed to that crowd of people who, yes, they like country music, but they grew up on rap music. So even though I grew up in a diverse background of like, seeing white music and black music, what I did not grow up around was country music, and I didn't get a chance to really be around people who listen to country music and rap music, and I didn't know that was a thing. And obviously now, 10 years later, you're looking at all these country acts that rap, and it's like normal. But I mean, I was in that stuff with those guys. A lot of those guys in the beginning who kind of trailblazed that, and just seeing that as a thing was like mind blowing to me. But to them and to everybody who was there, it was so normal. And that let me know, like, a lot of this stuff is in my head. I got to get out of my own way. Like my friend told me about 10 years before, you're thinking too much. And thinking gets in the way of being productive. It does. So, I know this is like a long video, but I'm really trying to make sure I hit all these points here for people who are in my situation, who were in my situation growing up. And it's not going to be the same. And that's the other part too. The internet is so different. You guys have the internet now. You're like 5, 10, 15 years old. You guys can go on the internet and learn anything about anything. And that's sweet. That's such an awesome thing. I don't want to be on this earth and not spread my message to you guys and let you guys know, like, don't be afraid of being who you are to the world, because who you are is amazing. And believe it or not, the world is much bigger than your little bubble. You put yourself out there and you want love and admiration, you'll get love and admiration. There are people out there who are like you. So from growing up as a kid, I felt like I was confused about how black I was, if I was black enough, even being questioned by white people if I was black enough, to, on the flip side, not being white enough to be able to play in certain clubs. Even though, by the way, I still got in there and killed that. I think for me, the moral of the story is that embrace who you are, embrace your heritage, embrace your experience growing up. I was born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. Who I am is so much of a product of the city. That's why I decided to make Born and Bred Charlotte. Because there's so many kids like me who grew up in this southern melting pot of culture, where I've had friends who were white, black, Asian, Korean, Indian, Middle Eastern. That's been my life. So now I'm gonna cut this off and enjoy my ride. If you guys like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to my channel. I want to thank you guys for coming to another Sunday morning, early morning drive with me, Prodigy Music Man. I love you guys. I'll see you later. Peace.